Agriculture is the backbone to Nebraska's economy. So how is Nebraska agriculture doing? What problems does it face? And what's ahead for the future? Tonight on Speaking of Nebraska, we put those questions to former U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Mike Johanns. Thanks for joining us on Speaking of Nebraska. I'm Nebraska Public Media News Director Dennis Kellogg. During the Trump administration, trade with foreign partners was among the top issues for farmers and ranchers. During the Biden administration, the same could be said, but a pandemic, among many other things, has taken over much of the spotlight. Tonight, we're going to talk agriculture with the former U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Mike Johanns. But first, the perspective of a Nebraskan who has also served at the USDA in Washington, D.C. Greg Ibaugh was the Undersecretary of Marketing and Regulatory Programs in the last administration. He's now back at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and he's still keeping his eye on trade.
The American farmer can never ignore the importance of trade. We produce more food in Nebraska than we can possibly consume, since we're the third or fourth largest ag economy in the United States, and especially on the red meat side of things, we're the number one red meat producing state in the nation. And so we definitely need to look outside the borders of Nebraska, and we even need to look outside the borders of the United States to be able to find a home for all the products that we produce. And so that's very important. We also need to be mindful of how that trade is evolving and the discussions around that. Telling our story about how we produce food, telling our story about the things that we're doing here in Nebraska that other nations around the world aren't doing, that make us already more sustainable, more resilient than probably any other place in the world. Our beef industry would be a great example of that. I think the key that we have to watch now is continued compliance with those agreements in Canada and Mexico and China, and making sure that the U.S. Trade Representative's Office and USDA's Trade Undersecretary's group and the Foreign Agricultural Service monitor that, alert the administration when they aren't adhering to those agreements, and we take action to try to bring them into compliance with those agreements.
Joining us now is former U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, former U.S. Senator, and former Nebraska Governor Mike Johanns. Secretary Johanns, thank you so much for taking time to be with us on Speaking of Nebraska.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Well, you're still very involved with agriculture. You sit on the board of directors of a few different ag companies like John Deere and Corteva. You also work as the chairman of agriculture for a company called Alliant Group in Texas. And you're still very much tuned into agriculture in the United States and worldwide. So let's start with the big picture. What is the state of agriculture in our country?
Big picture is that things are improving. You know, we came through 4 or 5 years here that were tough. You know, prices weren't good, and that kind of extended all across agriculture. So it didn't make a lot of difference whether you were growing corn or soybeans or feeding cattle or hogs or whatever. It just was a very challenging, difficult time. A lot of reasons for that. But now we're starting to see a lift. The last 12 months have been better. We've seen better prices in corn and soybeans. We've seen a little bit better prices in meat, which of course is huge here in Nebraska. And my thought is that 2022 will even be a bit better in the protein sector. So I'm encouraged. I like what I see.
That's very encouraging news for the producers out there. So as you look to the future, what do you see as the biggest threat to agriculture?
There are so many. One of the just basic things that we're dealing with today, and we talk a lot about it when I'm with people who are farming or ranching, and that is that there's just a great difference of or distance between people who produce, those who are raising the crops and feeding the cattle, et cetera, and those who are consuming. You know, when I grew up, everybody was connected to the farm. You know, I grew up on a farm. But if you didn't grow up on a farm, your grandfather farmed, or you lived in a small rural community, and that's just the nature of it. I'll never forget one time I took my mother around the section I grew up on, the 640 acres. And I counted that when I was growing up, there were 5 actively farming farm families on that section. There was one that day, and that pretty well describes agriculture. So that's a challenge, you know, when you get that kind of distance, if you will, from those who produce and those who consume, then the consumers can make some demands that, quite honestly, are nearly impossible to fulfill because there's that lack of grounding and understanding of what it takes to raise an animal, to feed it out, to produce it, and to be out there in the field and on and on. So I think that's one of the great challenges we face. But there's other challenges. You know, there's the day-to-day challenge of trade issues. I mean, any given day when I was Secretary of Agriculture, I'd drive into the office and there was a huge crisis. Why? Because Russia decided to close their borders to poultry or whatever. And so those were very, very significant challenges. You run into that all the time. Climate issues are a big issue now. Environmental issues weigh down on producers. So I could write a book on all of the challenges agriculture faces. It's a time when you got to really pay attention.
Well, and another challenge I think that's out there is struggling to retain young people in agriculture. And you talked about growing up on a farm, but are we making any progress there in keeping young people involved in agriculture?
You know, that's such a great question. When I was Secretary of Agriculture in preparation for a farm bill, I did listening sessions. We did them all 50 states. I did over 20 of them myself. And I'll never forget, I would always start with a 4-H member and a FFA member. And the reason for that is I had been in those programs. And so these young, bright, optimistic kids would get up and open up the listening session. And a young man stood up and he said, you know, Mr. Secretary, everybody's asking, how do you keep kids on the farm? He said, I'll tell you how to keep kids on the farm. Make sure there's some profitability and we'll stay home and we'll farm. And, you know, even as I think about that answer today, it's simplistic and profound all at the same time. This young man had just kind of figured out what is key here. And that's what I would say to that vast piece of the population that is now consuming more than producing, if you will. We have to make sure that there's profitability on the farm or it doesn't work. And young people will move away because they've got to make a living. You know, they got to pay the bills. They have to raise their kids, all of those things. And so a key issue here is to make sure we got the right combination of things going on so young people will stay on the farm and make their living there.
One way to profitability could be through trade, and that's always a big topic, as you mentioned. Of course, we had the Phase 1 trade deal and with China, and then the new NAFTA, the USMCA. And so now with the pandemic, we've seen the focus not so heavily on trade anyway, but how do you feel about the U.S. position with our trading partners right now?
Here's what I would say to people. Trade is an easy thing to condemn. You can look at some piece that is not working very well and you can say, well, why do we do this? Why do we do trade agreements? Doesn't make any sense to me. Well, for a state like Nebraska, it is absolutely essential that we have open trade corridors, that we have a level playing field for our producers. So when they sell their beef into China or any other part of the world, that playing field is level for them. And so trade is enormously important. We just simply produce more than we consume. And so that means we've got to market it somewhere. And worldwide opportunities are something we just have to work on constantly every day. I wish I could tell people that someday this will all be solved and it will be smooth sailing and everybody will have a big, bright smile on their face. That's not reality. Reality is that we need to make sure that we get the right trade agreements, we level the playing field, and then, most importantly, we enforce them. I think that's an area where we've fallen down over the years. We've not been aggressive enough with other countries and saying, you know, if we're going to live by the rules, you have to live by the rules.
Well, last week, the president of Nebraska's Farm Bureau said he wasn't happy with the current administration's trade efforts. Mark McHargue wrote to President Biden, "We have seen very little accomplished in the area of trade and trade policy. This lack of progress is unacceptable and undermines your pledge to restore U.S. global leadership." So do you think the Biden administration should be doing more? And if so, what more should they be doing?
The Biden administration won't do much in trade. And you know, you might be sitting there, or people are watching this and saying, well, Mike, that's unfair. He's only been there, what, 6, 8 months. How could he do very much at this point? But the reality is, the truth of the matter is that trade is a very difficult issue for President Biden. He gets all kinds of flack from unions and others, and saying, you know, don't do this, don't do that with trade. So I'm not optimistic, to be honest with you, about this administration when it comes to trade. I'm not optimistic that we're going to see a list of trade agreements that have been negotiated or improved or changed or modified. I'm not very optimistic about the enforcement. I think you'll hear about it, but in the end, I'm not sure that it's going to be as aggressive as it needs to be. Now, I hope you can invite me on your program 2 years from now and say, you know, Mike, you were dead wrong about all of this. But I think I've been around this long enough to know that I just don't see trade being top of his agenda at this point in time. And I'm not optimistic that we'll see it top of the agenda during this administration.
Well, let's talk specifically about some of those trade deals that are out there that we mentioned. Right before the pandemic started, here, the United States and China signed the Phase 1 trade deal. It took effect in February of 2020 and guaranteed China would purchase more American products, and also the deal cut some U.S. tariffs. Now, is American agriculture seeing any impact from that deal?
Yeah, part of the lift that we have seen in soybean prices especially, but in corn prices, even in the proteins, has been because of that Chinese trade agreement. Very important point to make here. There's a number of dynamics going on. One is that African swine fever swept across China. Very, very aggressive virus. And they lost about 50% of their pork production. Just disappeared. I mean, literally, it was a very, very devastating thing. So they're rebuilding that pork industry, but in the meantime, they need protein. So we kind of get the double benefit. They're buying our protein products like beef and pork and poultry, et cetera. But they're also rebuilding that hog herd, and so they're buying our soybeans and they're buying our corn too. So the answer to your question is most definitely we're seeing the benefits of that. That was a tough negotiating issue for the Trump administration. They worked their way through it. They took a very, very tough stand. It was tough on farmers and ranchers, but in the end, something had to be done. And I applaud the Trump administration for saying, hey, wait a second here, we're not going to put up with this. We have to have a level playing field. But it was a tough road. But in the end, we are now starting to see some of the benefits. Fingers crossed. My hope is we'll continue to see those benefits because China is a big player when it comes to trade.
Yeah, and you've mentioned enforcement before, and I want to ask you, Politico reported last week that China is further ahead on the purchasing benchmarks than they had been, but they're still not quite up to the requirements from the deal. So the U.S. trade rep said last week that they would maintain steep tariffs throughout continued talks. Do you think that's the right move, to keep the tariffs up?
You know, China needed to hear from us. This has been going on a long time. And I think China had an attitude of, well, we're such a big player here, such a big buyer, that we can push the envelope. And I think Donald Trump came in and said, guess what? You can't push the envelope. You're going to deal with higher tariffs. You're going to deal with pretty unfriendly economic situation with the United States unless we come to grips with some of the problems we're seeing. And so in the end, they battled through this. It was a big arm wrestling match for a long, long time. But in the end, they came up with an agreement. The trade representative's point is a very, very good point, though. They agreed to buy a certain level of our commodities and really across the board. And we need to make sure that they live up to that promise because that's extremely important to farmers and ranchers, not only in Nebraska, but across the United States.
And to follow up on our trade with China, they, I believe, purchase about 20% of U.S. ag products. Is that too much, considering the political tensions between the two countries? Should we diversify?
It's a great debate. You know, that's just any business out there that has one main customer that's buying 20% of their windows or doors or whatever they're producing. The owner probably goes to bed at night and says, man, I'm pretty heavily focused on this one customer. I need to spread that around because if that customer hiccups, I'm in trouble. If they get a cold, I'm going to get pneumonia. We face that with China. They are a big buyer of our ag products, and it's not just the 20%. In certain areas, like cotton would be a good example, soybeans would be another good example. They buy a very large piece of our production. So my hope is that the Biden administration, but every administration, says we've got to do other things. We've got to negotiate trade agreements that level the playing field for farmers and ranchers in other parts of the world. Economies are growing in India and Africa, not everywhere in India, not everywhere in Africa, but we need to keep our eye on the ball. If an administration comes to office, if somebody takes the White House and they don't negotiate trade agreements to try to improve the trade picture and level of the playing field, I know who will suffer. It's the farmer out in Aurora, or it's the rancher out in western Nebraska. So very important that we have people who are doing everything they can, again, to level the playing field and open up markets for U.S. products and Nebraska products.
We're talking with former U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Mike Johanns, also former U.S. Senator and former governor of Nebraska, tonight on Speaking of Nebraska. The other trade deal, the big one out there, is USMCA. That's the deal between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. The big ag impact in the U.S. is access to more Canadian dairy. How do you think USMCA is playing out for farmers here?
It's a better agreement than NAFTA, and I think that's what Trump wanted to accomplish. The president looked at NAFTA and said, you know, it was too one-sided, and came into office and said, we're going to come up with a better situation. So I think in looking at the two agreements, you can say, no doubt about it, it definitely is an improvement. But your question really gets to the heart of the issue, and it's what we've talked about before. It's one thing to have words on paper and have this big signing ceremony and everybody's patting each other on the back and lifting the champagne glass or whatever they're doing. It's quite another thing to make sure that that trade agreement is enforced and that everybody's living by the terms of that trade agreement. Canada historically has been extremely protective of certain segments of their economy. Lumber would be a good example, but milk is another good example. And, you know, if they want the benefits of a trade agreement, if they want the benefits of a U.S. marketplace, they have to live by the rules. And so, see, here we're back to where we were before. It's great to have the agreement, but you've got to have the enforcement, or it's just words on paper.
We've talked about some of our familiar trading partners like China and Canada and Mexico, but are there countries out there that you think we should be aggressively going after to market our products that we really aren't doing that right now?
Yeah, it'd be a whole host of countries. Taiwan would be a good example. Historically, they have really enjoyed beef, and so that's an important thing. So. Many times in my career, I've been in Taiwan promoting the idea that they needed to buy more U.S. beef. So Taiwan would be an example. Japan is an example. You know, we haven't talked about Japan, but they're a large buyer of U.S. beef. And again, you need to make sure that Japan is keeping their markets open, that they're not using excuses to push back on buying products from the United States. I pay a lot of attention to Africa. I have for a long time. There are parts of Africa that are still very chaotic. Stable government is hard to come by. But there are other parts of Africa where I do believe there's great opportunity, not only today, but in the future. Because if you look where the population of the world is growing and where the middle class is growing, you have to look at China or Africa, and you have to look at India. And so those might be a little bit futuristic, but it's not going to take long for them to have a major presence in terms of products they want. Because what happens when people start earning more and they have some disposable income, the first thing they do is improve their diet. And that typically means more protein. The world needs protein. What do we do very well here in in Nebraska? We grow or we produce meat products, and we do it very, very well, best in the world.
Yeah, it's no secret that Nebraska is a red meat state. That's at least, there are at least 6 large packing plants in Nebraska, and a focus among producers is meat packing and the power the packers have because the industry is so consolidated between 4 companies. How healthy do you think the beef industry is, and what's your take on consolidation?
Well, there's just no question over time that consolidation has occurred in agriculture, and it's not just in processing. It's all across the board. I would love to regale you with tales about growing up on a quarter section of land. Some years we'd run another 40 or another 80, but by and large, it was that family farm, that 1950s, 60s family farm. That really is an entity that's very, very hard to keep a family provided for. So what happened? Consolidation occurred. It's occurred in processing. Now, I do think that many in the industry and who are producing the meat are saying, look, that's unfair. I can't even get a price for my meat. There's no, how do you determine the market value of an animal when virtually no open market exists? So you're going to start to see more activity, I believe, to try to improve that situation. But the capital investment necessary to open up a beef processing plant is pretty darn enormous. And so I'm not expecting this to happen dramatically. I'm not expecting it to happen very quickly. But I think producers would benefit by having other options. So we'll see. But that's not an overnight solution. I'll guarantee that.
Of course, there's another farm bill looming out there in 2024. What are the things you're going to be looking for and watching to see how effective that piece of legislation could be?
You know, I've said many times that farm bills are very important. There are other things like trade and tax policy and that sort of thing that are as important. But yeah, you're right. Here we come up on another farm bill. To me, I look at the safety net. It's very important. I don't think any farmer or rancher wants to go back to the days where the government was trying to guarantee income by limiting production and saying, you can only produce this or that on your land. Farmers want to have the ability to be productive. They are the most productive in the world here in Nebraska and across the United States. So I always look at that. I also look at trade policy. I look at beginning farmer issues. I think I was the first Secretary of Agriculture that literally had a specific piece for that. So I want to make sure that there's opportunities there for young people to do what we talked about before, and that is stay on the farm. I'll look very, very closely at conservation. The reason why that gets my attention is I think it's important. I think farmers have benefited from that. The environment has benefited from that. But on the other hand, you don't want it to be distorting. You don't want so much going into conservation that literally you distort prices because you've taken land out of production. The other thing I pay a lot of attention to is what they're doing with renewable fuels. Biofuels are very important, so biodiesel, ethanol. What kind of commitment is this administration going to be making to that? That's an important issue for the state of Nebraska. So it's a whole host of issues, but those would be some of the key things that come to mind.
Just have a couple of minutes left, and I do want to ask you a couple of other non-ag questions that relate to the state of Nebraska. Your former colleague, Ben Nelson, has written a book called Death of the Senate, and he's arguing bipartisanship has really declined recently. As you watch from afar as a former senator, are you concerned about what's going on in Washington?
I am concerned. You know, I'd offer a couple of thoughts about that. Washington is a place with sharp elbows. It's a place where people engage in governing in a way that has, you know, some black eyes and bruised ribs left behind. Now, having said that, I know so many United States senators and even House members, although I never served in the House, who are truly there for the right reason. You know, I could name people like John Cornyn from Texas, Chuck Grassley from Iowa, Deb Fischer from Nebraska, and I could go on and on. These people are there because they want to make the government work. So I think if you can really focus on that group of people, because they are leaders, you know, when you look at Deb Fischer, she is a leader now in the United States Senate. She has huge credibility. So when she speaks about agriculture, everybody at that noon luncheon is leaning over to see what Deb has to say. So there are people like that, and it's important that we focus on the fact that there are people there getting the job done, making the hard choices, building the legislation that's necessary, whatever it is. Bipartisanship is tougher to come by. You have to work harder to make it work.
It certainly is. Well, it's been great spending some time with you, former U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, former Governor, former U.S. Senator Mike Johanns. Thanks so much for making time and stopping by and speaking with us on Speaking of Nebraska.
Glad to do it. Thank you.
All right. This discussion and the rest of our program are available on our website. You can go to nebraskapublicmedia.org/Speaking of Nebraska and join the conversation on social media. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Nebraska Public Media. That's going to conclude tonight's conversation. Join us next week. We'll be talking about COVID-19 with two doctors and Nebraska's new state epidemiologist. Until then, I'm Nebraska Public Media News Director Dennis Kellogg. We'll see you next week.